Have you ever wondered what it would be like to visit a country with the largest waterfall system in the world, the highest mountain in the Americas, and a national dish so beloved it's practically a weekend religion? Well, wonder no longer, because in this video, we're heading to Argentina to uncover its fantastic origins, from its history and geography to its current economy and culture. So, keep watching. Imagine you're sailing across a vast unknown ocean over 500 years ago. You're not sure what you'll find, but you've heard whispers of a place filled with unimaginable riches. This is how the story of Argentina begins, a story of discovery, conflict, and the birth of a nation. In the early 1500s, European explorers were all about finding new lands. They were basically the original travel influencers. So, in the early 16th century, a couple of explorers, namely Amerigo Vespucci and Juan Díaz de Solís, sailed down the Atlantic coast of South America. Solís was the first to find a huge, wide river mouth, so big he called it the freshwater sea, or Mar Dulce. But his trip took a bad turn when he and his crew were attacked by local indigenous peoples. It was a clear sign that this new land wasn't going to be an easy place to settle. A few years later, another explorer named Sebastian Cabot showed up. He sailed further up the rivers, discovering the Paraná and Paraguay, and set up the first Spanish settlement in the area. And here's where the story gets really interesting. He sent back stories to Spain about finding silver. This wasn't just a rumour, it's why the area eventually got its name. Argentina, from the Latin word argentum, which means silver. So even though they never found the enchanted city of the Caesars, this legend of silver kept people coming. But the first attempt to build a city, or what we now call Buenos Aires, didn't go so well. The Spanish explorer Pedro de Mendoza founded a settlement in 1536. But things were so tough, especially with food shortages and attacks from indigenous groups, that the settlers had to abandon it just a few years later. That's why the first successful permanent Spanish settlement wasn't Buenos Aires at all, but Asunción, which is now the capital of Paraguay. For a long time, this was the main hub of activity in the region, with most of the Spanish settlers living there. The Spanish ruled this land for almost 300 years, and for a long time, the area that is now Argentina was just a small, less important part of the massive viceroyalty of Peru. But things started to change in the late 1700s. The economy started to shift, and people began trading more with Europe directly across the Atlantic. This made Buenos Aires a much more important city. Then, in 1776, Spain decided to create a new political area, the Viceroyalty of the Rio de la Plata, and they made Buenos Aires its capital. This was a huge deal because it gave the city and the whole region a new sense of identity and importance. But in the early 1800s, British forces tried to invade Buenos Aires. Of course, as with other stories of colonization, the locals fought them off on their own. This made the people of Buenos Aires realize something. They could defend themselves without Spain's help. Soon after, Napoleon invaded Spain, which weakened the Spanish government's control over its colonies. And that's when the people in Argentina saw their chance. So, on May 25th, 1810, they created their own government. And just 6 years later, on July 9th, 1816, they officially declared independence. After independence, the country was a mess. It was basically a free-for-all, with different provinces and military leaders fighting for power. The old viceroyalty of the Rio de la Plata broke apart, and countries like Paraguay, Bolivia, and Uruguay went their own way. It wasn't until 1861 that the different provinces finally came together to form the united country we know today. Fast forwarding to 1946, a military man named Juan Perón became president. He was incredibly popular with the working class, and his wife Eva, known to everyone as Evita, became a national icon. She started a foundation that gave money and benefits to the poor, and when she died of cancer in 1952, the entire country mourned. She was a symbol of hope for so many people. Eventually, Perón was forced out of office, but his political movement, known as Peronism, remained a powerful force in Argentina. After years of political fighting and a near civil war, Perón was re-elected in 1973. But he died just a year later, and his new wife, Isabel, took over. The economy fell apart and things got really bad. The military took control in 1976 and started a dark and brutal period known as the Dirty War. thousands of people, anywhere from 20,000 to 30,000, disappeared or were killed. This violent era came to an end in 1982, when the military president, General Leopoldo Galtieri, made a huge mistake. He thought he could invade the Falkland Islands, which Argentina calls the Malvinas Islands, and the British wouldn't fight back. And guess what? He was completely wrong. The British won a quick victory, and the humiliating defeat led to the end of the military government and the return of democracy. But history is just one piece of the puzzle. To really get the full picture of Argentina, we have to look at its geography. And when you do, the first thing you notice is its sheer size. Seriously, Argentina is the 8th largest country in the world, and the 2nd largest in all of South America, right after Brazil. It covers a mind-blowing 2.7 million square kilometres. That's about 1.07 million square miles. To give you an idea, that's roughly a third of the entire United States. It's so big, it's basically shaped like an inverted triangle, stretching about 3,800 kilometres, or 2,360 miles from its top, all the way down to its southern tip. Now imagine a country where you can go from sweltering rainforests to dry, windswept plains to towering snow-capped mountains and massive glaciers. Seems impossible, right? But that's Argentina for you. It's bordered by the Andes Mountains to the west and the Atlantic Ocean to the east, and it shares borders with 5 other countries: Chile, Bolivia, Paraguay, Brazil, and Uruguay. Inside, you can really break Argentina down into 5 major geographical regions, each with its own character. So let's start up in the northeast. This is the rainforest region, and it's a hot, humid, and super wet area. It's bordered by Argentina's 2 largest rivers, the Paraná and the Uruguay. The Paraná is actually the 2nd longest river in all of South America, second only to the Amazon. And if you're a fan of waterfalls, you'll want to see this. This region is home to the mighty Iguazu Falls, the largest waterfall system in the world, with over 275 individual waterfalls. It's a jaw-dropping sight. But more than that, this area also has the Ibera wetlands, the 2nd largest wetlands on the planet, after the Brazilian Pantanal. It's a huge freshwater reserve, covering about 13,000 square kilometres, which is roughly 5,000 square miles of swamps and lagoons. From the rainforest, let's move west to the Gran Chaco. It's a vast, semi-arid plain with forests and savannas. The word Chaco comes from a word that means hunting ground, and you can see why. It's a huge, gently sloping plain that stretches into Bolivia and Paraguay too. Now, if you've heard anything about Argentina, you've probably heard about this next place, the Pampas. The name itself is a Quechua word that means flat plain, and it's exactly that. This is one of the largest and most fertile grassland plains in the world, covering almost a third of Argentina. This is the home of the gaucho, the famous cowboys of Argentina, and where you'll find the country's world-famous beef cattle, grazing on some of the richest topsoils you can find anywhere. This place is so productive, it helped turn Argentina into a major economic player in the early 20th century. Okay, now let's go way down south, to Patagonia. It's a long, dry and windy plateau that stretches all the way down to the very tip of the continent, known as Tierra del Fuego. Patagonia is famous for its incredible mountain peaks, massive ice fields, and breathtaking glaciers. The most famous is the Perito Moreno Glacier in Los Glaciares National Park. It holds the world's 3rd largest reserve of fresh water, and, get this, it's one of the only glaciers in the world that's still advancing, not shrinking. And finally, we have the Andes Mountains. These aren't just any mountains, they're the longest mountain chain in the world, forming the backbone of South America and a natural border with Chile. This is where you'll find the highest point in all of the Americas, and the highest mountain outside of Asia, Mount Aconcagua. This majestic peak rises to a staggering 6,960 metres, or 22,837 feet, into the sky. So, from a humid, watery north, through dry plains and fertile grasslands, all the way down to a chilly, glacier-filled south, Argentina's geography is as varied and complex as its history. And as you'll see later on, as wild and bumpy as the economy. For years, the country was stuck in a tough spot. In the middle of 2024, poverty rates were at a staggering high of 52.9%, and annual inflation was over 200%. Think about that for a second. It means prices for everything more than doubled in just 1 year. That kind of instability makes life incredibly difficult for everyday people. But things are changing fast. The new government came in with a plan to get the country's finances in order. And a major part of that was fiscal discipline, which is a fancy way of saying they are cutting government spending. They've been so disciplined, in fact, that they're expected to have a primary budget surplus of 1.6% of GDP for 2025. That means the government is actually bringing in more money than it's spending, which is a huge step towards stability. This fiscal discipline has helped in the fight against inflation. We've seen a dramatic drop in monthly inflation, which was just 1.6% in June 2025. So, while the annual rate is still a work in progress, this sharp decline is a massive win and has already helped bring down the poverty rate to its lowest level since 2018 at 31.6%. That's a huge drop and shows that these changes are having a real impact on people's lives. And what about the overall economy? Well, it's not just about stopping the decline, it's about turning things around and seeing real growth. After 6 straight quarters of the economy shrinking, it's now growing again. In the first part of 2025, Argentina's GDP grew by a strong 5.8% compared to the year before. This rebound is so significant that it's expected to help push the country's nominal GDP to an estimated $683.5 billion by the end of 2025. That makes Argentina's economy the 23rd largest in the world. This growth is being led by a few key areas, especially agriculture, which saw a 3.7% increase, and financial services, which jumped an amazing 27.2%. So, while there's still a long way to go and challenges remain, these numbers are giving a lot of people a reason to be hopeful. They show that the country is not just surviving, it's starting to recover, and it's doing so in a way that's building a stronger foundation for the future. But before we look to the future, let's first understand the present, especially in the way people live now. Because unlike many of its neighbours, Argentina has a huge European influence, especially from Spain and Italy. In fact, a whopping 95% of the population is of European descent. This is partly because many of the native indigenous populations unfortunately died from diseases brought over by the European settlers. Today, nearly half of the country's population lives in and around Buenos Aires, a city that's often called the Paris of South America, because of its beautiful European architecture and cosmopolitan vibe. Okay, so if you want to be a true Argentine, there are a few things you have to do. First up, you have to learn to love mate. This isn't just a drink, it's a social ritual. It's a bitter green tea made from the leaves of the yerba mate plant, and it's full of energy. Kind of like a strong coffee, you'll see people everywhere sharing it from a special hollowed-out gourd, passed around with a metal straw called a bombilla. It's a sign of friendship and community, and it's a huge part of daily life. And of course, we can't talk about Argentina without talking about the tango. This dance is pure passion. It was born from the loneliness of immigrants who found a way to express themselves through dramatic and sultry movements. You can see big, flashy shows in tango palaces in Buenos Aires. But to see the real thing, you have to go to a neighbourhood milonga, which is a traditional dance hall. Here you'll see people of all ages gliding across the floor, and the action doesn't even get started until close to midnight. But if tango is the art of Argentina, then football or soccer is its religion. Argentinians are beyond passionate about their teams. The energy in a stadium is something you have to experience to believe, with chanting, banners, and an atmosphere that is electric. This fierce love for the game has produced some of the greatest players in history, like Diego Maradona, and, of course, the legend himself, Lionel Messi. The rivalry between Buenos Aires teams Boca Juniors and River Plate is one of the most intense in the world. It's pretty epic. But that's not all Argentina's about, because next up is for the foodies. So, listen up. Argentina is a carnivore's paradise. As a cattle-raising country, they take their meat seriously. So seriously that Argentina has the highest red meat consumption in the world. Their national dish is the asado, which is so much more than a barbecue. It's a social event, a Sunday ritual where families and friends gather around the grill for hours, enjoying perfectly cooked cuts of meat, sausages and ribs. Speaking of food, you can't leave without trying a dulce de leche. It's a creamy, sweet, caramelized treat that they put on everything. I'm talking on toast, in ice cream, in cakes, and especially in a delicious cookie sandwich called an alfajor. So if you ever plan on visiting this beautiful country, here's a quick tip on how to act like a local. Argentinians are warm and expressive. When you meet someone, it's normal to greet them with a kiss on the right cheek, even between men. It's a habit that shows that deep-rooted Italian influence. They're also not too big on being on time. So if you're invited to someone's home, it's considered polite to show up 30 to 45 minutes late. Isn't that interesting? But besides going to a get-together late, what's one thing you'd want to experience in Argentina? Is it learning the tango, sipping on mate, or cheering at a football game? Whatever it is, I'd love to know. So share your thoughts in the comments down below. And as always, if you loved this video, you'll enjoy this next one.